My mother was standing in my wedding venue, holding a seating chart I had never seen before. I only realized something was wrong when I noticed one name at the front table. My ex. Not hidden. Not accidental. Front table. I thought maybe it was a mistake, until I kept reading. Because my best friend's name wasn't there at all. Just gone. I looked at my mother and asked her what she'd done. And she smiled, like she always did when she'd already decided something for me. She said, "I made a few changes." Changes. To my wedding. The day before it was happening. Guests were already arriving. Everything was already set. And somehow, I was the only person who didn't know what my own wedding looked like. That was the moment something in me finally shifted. Because what she didn't know yet was that I was about to make one phone call that would undo everything she'd planned. I grew up in a house where decisions were never really mine. They just felt like they were. My mother had a way of asking questions that already had answers. What dress do you like more, this one or this one? What school do you think is better, the one 10 minutes away or the one across the city? It always sounded like I had a choice. But if I picked the wrong one, she'd pause, smile, and gently explain why the other option made more sense. And somehow, I would agree. Not because I wanted to, but because she made it feel like the smart thing to do. The reasonable thing. The thing a good daughter would do. Growing up, people used to tell me how lucky I was. Your mom is so involved. Your mom cares so much. Your mom is always there for you. And they weren't wrong. She was always there. At every school meeting, every event, every decision, even the ones that didn't need her, especially those. By the time I was in my 20s, I had learned something without ever saying it out loud. It was just easier to let her lead. Less friction, less tension, less of that quiet disappointment in her eyes that made me feel like I had done something wrong, even when I hadn't. So I became agreeable. Independent on the surface, but still orbiting around her approval. Even when I moved out, she still had a key. Even when I got my first real job, she still helped me think through every major decision. Even when I dated, she had opinions. Carefully worded, softly delivered, but always there. And then I met Daniel. He wasn't loud. He wasn't controlling. He didn't try to take over my life, which at the time felt unfamiliar in a quiet way. He asked what I wanted. Not what made sense. Not what was best. Just what I wanted. And the first time he asked me that, I remember pausing longer than I should have. Because I didn't actually know. That was the moment I realized something about myself I had never put into words. I had spent my whole life becoming someone my mother would approve of. Not someone I had chosen to be. Daniel didn't push me to change. He just waited, gave me space. And somehow, that space made me start noticing things I had ignored for years. Like how often I checked my phone after making a decision just to see if my mother had texted. Like how I rehearsed conversations in my head before telling her something, already preparing to justify myself. Like how relief felt when she agreed with me, and guilt followed when she didn't. When Daniel proposed, it wasn't dramatic. No big crowd. No performance. Just the two of us on a quiet evening, sitting side by side. He asked me if I wanted to build a life with him. Simple. Direct. And for the first time in a long time, my answer came without hesitation. Yes. I told my mother that night, and she reacted exactly how everyone expected her to. Excited. Proud. Already talking about venues before I had even processed what had just happened. At first, I thought it was sweet. She offered to help with the planning. Said she wanted to take some of the pressure off me. And honestly, I was relieved. Wedding planning felt overwhelming. Too many choices. Too many details. Too many opportunities to get something wrong. So when she stepped in, I let her. At the beginning, it felt collaborative. She would send options. I would pick from them. She would make calls. I would say thank you. It felt manageable, comfortable, familiar. Daniel stayed mostly out of it. He trusted me. And I told myself I had everything under control. But slowly, things started to shift in ways I didn't fully notice at first. Details were getting finalized without me. Decisions were being made for convenience. Conversations turned into updates instead of questions. And every time I felt that small flicker of discomfort, I did what I had always done. I told myself it was fine, that she was just trying to help, that it was easier this way. Until one afternoon, when I realized there were entire parts of my own wedding I had never actually seen. The first time something really stayed with me was over something small. Not the wedding dress. Just a reception outfit. I had saved a few options on my phone. Soft fabrics. Simple cuts. Things that felt like me. Nothing loud. Nothing heavy. Just comfortable. I sent them to my mother one afternoon. She didn't reply, which wasn't unusual. But later that evening she called. Her tone was light, almost pleased. "I found something better," she said. Better. That word always sounded gentle, but it never really felt like a suggestion. She sent me a photo. It was beautiful, structured, elegant, a little rigid, the kind of outfit that photographs well, but doesn't breathe. I stared at it for a while, trying to imagine myself wearing it, trying to feel something. I didn't. I told her that. Carefully. I said I liked something simpler, something I could move in, something that felt more like me. She let me finish. She always did. And then she explained. The venue, the lighting, the guests, how certain silhouettes read better, how people would expect a certain level of presentation. She never raised her voice, never dismissed me outright. She just made her version sound like the logical one, the right one. And without even realizing it, I agreed. Again. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand. That quiet feeling settled in my chest. Not anger, not even frustration, just something slightly off. Like I had stepped aside from something that should have belonged to me. But I told myself it didn't matter. It was just an outfit. One day, one moment, not worth tension. So I let it go. And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because after that, I started noticing patterns. Small ones at first. Easy to ignore. The florist stopped looping me into emails. They contacted my mother directly. The caterer confirmed menu changes I didn't remember approving. When I asked about it, she already had answers. Already handled. Already finalized. Each time, it sounded reasonable, efficient, helpful. And every time I felt that small hesitation, I pushed it down. Because technically nothing was wrong. Everything was getting done. The wedding was coming together. People kept telling me how lucky I was. How organized everything seemed, how calm I looked, and I smiled, because I did feel calm, but not in a good way, more like I wasn't fully inside it, like I was watching it happen instead of living it. Daniel noticed before I said anything. He didn't confront me. He wasn't like that, but he started asking quiet questions. Did you pick this? Is this what you wanted? Simple questions. But they lingered longer than they should have. I always had an answer ready. Of course I did. It's just easier this way. She's helping. It's less stressful. And he would nod. Accept it. But I could see it in his face sometimes. That pause. Like he was choosing not to say something. One evening, we sat down together to go over the guest list. Or at least, I thought we were. I opened the file on my phone. Started scrolling. Family names I recognized. Friends. Colleagues. And then names I didn't know. Not just one or two. Several. Placed neatly throughout the list. As if they had always been there. I frowned. Scrolled back up. Read slower. Still didn't recognize them. The next day, I asked my mother. She laughed softly. Like I was overthinking something simple. They're important, she said. Connections. People who should be there. I asked why I hadn't met them. She gave me that same calm tone. That's just how these things work. How these things work. I nodded. even though something about that answer didn't sit right. Later that night, I opened the list again. This time, I took my time, line by line, name by name, and then I saw hers. Rachel, my best friend, the one who had seen every version of me, the one who never needed me to explain myself. She was still there, but something about it felt unstable, like her place wasn't secure, like she could disappear from that list without anyone telling me. I stared at her name longer than I expected to, a quiet unease settling in, not because anything had happened yet, but because I suddenly understood something I hadn't wanted to see before. This wasn't collaboration. It wasn't help. It was control just dressed up carefully enough that I kept saying yes. And for the first time, I started to wonder what would happen if I stopped agreeing. But I didn't realize how far things had already gone, until something I never thought she'd touch disappeared completely. I didn't notice it right away. That's the part that still stays with me. It wasn't some big, obvious moment. No announcement. No conversation. Just absence. Rachel texted me 3 days before the wedding. Short message. Hey, did I miss something? I remember reading it twice. Then a third time. Because something in the wording felt careful. Like she already knew something wasn't right. I called her immediately. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I got a message from your mom, she said. Just like that. No build-up. No cushioning. She said there was a mix-up with the guest list, and that it would be better if I didn't come. I didn't respond right away, because my brain was trying to catch up to what I had just heard. A mix-up. Better if you didn't come. To my wedding. My best friend. The one person who knew exactly how much this day meant, and why. I asked her what exactly the message said. Word for word. She read it to me. Polite. Well written. Carefully phrased. It sounded almost reasonable if you didn't know the context. Limited space. Important family dynamics. Last-minute adjustments. The kind of message that made it sound like an unfortunate situation instead of a decision. I felt something shift in my chest. Not loud. Not explosive. Just steady. Cold. I told Rachel I would call her back. She didn't argue. She just said, okay. But there was something in her voice. Not hurt. Not anger. Just distance. Like she had already started pulling herself away. And that scared me more than anything. I hung up and sat there for a moment. Phone still in my hand. Breathing slower than I should have been. Because a part of me already knew the answer. I just needed to hear it out loud. I drove to my mother's house without calling first. She opened the door like nothing was wrong. Like this was any normal visit. I walked inside. Didn't sit down. Didn't take off my shoes. I just asked her, why did you uninvite Rachel? No hesitation. No confusion. She sighed lightly like I had asked something inconvenient. Then she said, I didn't uninvite her. That pause. That familiar shift in language. I just adjusted things. Adjusted. I repeated her words back to her. Slowly. And then I asked her why. That's when she finally looked at me, not as her daughter, but as someone she needed to manage. She doesn't fit, she said. Simple. Clean. Final. I felt my stomach drop. Doesn't fit. Like Rachel was a detail. An aesthetic problem. Something that disrupted the image she had created. I asked her what that meant, and she explained. Not emotionally. Not defensively. Just logically. Different background. Different energy. Not the kind of person that belongs at an event like this. An event like this. My wedding. I stared at her, trying to understand how she could say something like that and still believe she was helping me. And then she added something that made everything worse. I replaced her seat with someone more appropriate. Replaced. Like Rachel was interchangeable. Like years of friendship could be swapped out for someone who matched a table setting. That's when it hit me. Fully. Not just the guest list. Not just the dress. Not just the small decisions. Everything. The venue. The food. The people. The entire structure of the day. None of it had been mine. I wasn't planning a wedding. I was participating in something she had built. And I had let it happen. Piece by piece. Agreement by agreement. Until there was almost nothing left of me in it. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't argue. Didn't cry. I just stood there, taking it in. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to make it make sense. I was seeing it clearly. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. She kept talking, explaining, justifying, telling me I would thank her later, that this was what was best, that I didn't understand how these things worked. But I wasn't listening anymore. Not really, because something had already shifted. Deep and quiet. The kind of shift that doesn't announce itself, but changes everything that comes after it. I left her house without saying much, got into my car, closed the door, and just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing slow, steady, because the truth had finally settled in. If I didn't do something now, I was going to walk into a wedding that didn't belong to me, and marry a man who deserved better than a version of me that kept saying yes to the wrong things. That was the moment I realized I had already lost control of everything, unless I was willing to take it back. I didn't call Rachel back right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew the next thing I did would matter. Not just for her, for everything. I drove home slowly. No music, no distractions, just the quiet hum of the road and my own thoughts finally, not avoiding anything. For the first time, I wasn't trying to justify my mother. I wasn't softening what she did. I wasn't finding a way to make it feel reasonable. I was just letting it be what it was. Control. Carefully disguised. Repeated for so long that I had learned to cooperate with it. And now, it had reached the one place it should never have touched. My choice. My people. My life. When I got home, Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, half-finished list in front of him. He looked up the second I walked in, not alarmed, just attentive, like he had been waiting. I put my keys down, sat across from him, and for a moment, I didn't say anything, because I wasn't used to saying things directly, not without filtering them first, not without softening them. But this time, I didn't. My mom uninvited Rachel, I said. Simple. Clear. He didn't interrupt. Didn't react right away. Just listened. So I kept going. I told him everything. The message. The reasoning. The way she said Rachel didn't fit. The replacement. The pattern. All of it. And the entire time he didn't try to fix it. Didn't jump in. Didn't tell me what to do. He just stayed there. Present. Steady. When I finished, there was a quiet pause. Not uncomfortable. Just space. Then he asked me one question. What do you want to do? Not what should we do? Not what makes sense. Not what will keep things smooth. What do you want? I felt that question land differently this time. Because for once, I wasn't reaching for someone else's answer. I already knew. I don't want this wedding, I said. And even hearing myself say it, something inside me settled. Not panic. Not fear. Just clarity. He nodded slowly, like he had expected that answer. Okay, he said. Just that. No pressure. No resistance. No hesitation. And in that moment, I realized something else. This wasn't just about my mother. It was about me finally choosing something, without asking permission. We sat there for a while, going through everything calmly, not emotionally, not reactively, just practically. What had already been paid, what could be changed, what couldn't, who needed to know, and how. There were a lot of moving pieces, a lot of expectations already in place. Family, guests, money, reputation, all the things my mother had been so focused on. But for the first time, none of that felt like the most important thing. Because underneath all of it, there was a simpler truth. If I went through with this as it was, I would be agreeing again, one more time. And I knew I wouldn't be able to undo that. Not later. Not after the vows. Not after the photos. Not after everyone told me how beautiful it all was. So we didn't rush. We didn't react out of anger. We just started making decisions. Carefully. Intentionally. I picked up my phone at one point, scrolled to Rachel's name, hovered for a second, then locked the screen again. Not yet. Because I didn't want to call her with uncertainty. I wanted to call her with something real. Something that meant something. Daniel noticed. Didn't ask. He just reached across the table and rested his hand lightly over mine. Not to guide me. Not to influence me. Just there. And that small, steady presence made something inside me feel stronger than it had in a long time. We stayed up late that night. Not arguing. Not panicking. Just rebuilding something quietly. Piece by piece. By the time we were done, I wasn't overwhelmed anymore. I wasn't unsure. I wasn't waiting for my mother's approval. I knew exactly what needed to happen. And, more importantly, I knew I was the one who had to do it. Because this wasn't something she could fix. This wasn't something anyone else could smooth over. This was mine. Finally, I picked up my phone again. This time, I didn't hesitate. Because there was only one call that mattered before anything else could move forward. I called Rachel the next morning. Not late. Not after thinking about it all day. Early. Before anything else could get in the way. She picked up quickly, like she had been expecting it. I didn't start with an explanation. Or an apology. Not right away. I need you there, I said. My voice was steady. Not emotional. Not rushed. Just clear. There was a pause on the other end. Not long, but long enough for me to feel the weight of everything that had already happened. I thought I wasn't invited anymore, she said. Still calm. Still careful. And I understood why. Because from her perspective, she had already been pushed out. Quietly. Politely. Effectively. That wasn't my decision, I said. And this time, I didn't soften it. I didn't protect my mother in how I said it. I didn't adjust the truth to make it easier to hear. That wasn't my decision, and it's not happening. Another pause. Different this time. Less distance. More attention. I told her what I was doing. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Enough for her to understand that I wasn't going along with it anymore. Enough for her to hear something real in my voice. And when she spoke again, it was the first time I heard something shift back. Okay, she said. Just that. But it meant everything. We didn't need a long conversation. There was nothing to explain between us that hadn't already been understood. I hung up and immediately moved to the next call. The venue. I asked for the coordinator. Introduced myself properly this time. Not as my mother's daughter. Not as someone checking in. As the bride. There was a small pause on their end. Just enough to register the change. Then I started asking questions. Direct ones. About the layout. The seating. The final list. The timeline. And with each answer, a clearer picture formed. Not just of what had been planned, but of how much had been decided without me. Tables rearranged. Guest placements adjusted. Last-minute additions confirmed. All under my name. All without my voice. I listened carefully. Didn't interrupt. Didn't react. Just took it in. Then I asked them to send me everything. Every document. Every confirmation. Every finalized detail. They hesitated slightly. Then agreed. Within an hour, my inbox filled. Files. Attachments. Schedules. Layouts. The full version of a wedding I hadn't actually planned. I sat at the kitchen table again, Daniel beside me, and we went through everything. Slowly. Carefully. Not emotionally. Just clearly. Line by line. Decision by decision. And for the first time, I wasn't reacting to what my mother had done. I was choosing what I wanted instead. Some things stayed. Not everything needed to change, but a lot did. Guest list first. Names removed. Names added back. Rachel's name placed exactly where it should have always been. Then the seating. balanced differently. Not for appearance, for people, for relationships, for comfort. Then the smaller things, details I had never even seen before, adjusted, simplified, made mine. With each change, something inside me settled further. Not rushed, not chaotic, just intentional. By the afternoon, everything was different. Not dramatically, but meaningfully. Enough that when I looked at it, I recognized it. For the first time. But there was still one thing left. The part that couldn't be done quietly. The part that had been avoided for years. Daniel looked at me. Didn't ask. He already knew. I picked up my phone again. Scrolled to her name. This time, there was no hesitation. Because this wasn't about explaining myself. Or asking for understanding. This was about setting something that should have been said a long time ago. I pressed call, knowing this conversation was going to change more than just the wedding. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. Like nothing had happened. Like we were still in the version of things where she made decisions, and I followed. I didn't match her tone. I didn't soften mine either. "I spoke to the venue," I said. A small pause. Just enough for her to realize this wasn't a casual call. "And," she asked. "Careful now." Measured. "I have all the final plans," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "I've made some changes." That's when I heard it. That shift in her breathing. The moment she understood something had moved without her. "What kind of changes?" she asked. Still calm. But there was something underneath it now. Control slipping. "Rachel is coming," I said. Simple. Direct. "And she's sitting at the front table." Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Just silence. Then, "That's not appropriate," she said. Not raised. Not emotional. Just firm. Like she was correcting something small. "No," I said. "It is." Another pause. Different now. Tighter. "You don't understand how these things work," she said. And for the first time in my life, that sentence didn't land. Not as pressure. Not as guidance. Just noise. "I do," I said quietly. "And I'm not doing it that way." She exhaled slowly. Then shifted. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "There are expectations. People are coming. Everything is already arranged." I listened. Let her finish. Didn't interrupt. Because I knew this wasn't about the details. It never had been. "This is my wedding," I said. Not louder. Not sharper. Just certain. "And I'm going to recognize it when I walk into it." That landed. I could feel it. Not because she agreed, but because she didn't have an immediate answer. "You're being emotional," she said finally. And that one almost made me smile. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. Predictable. The last place she always went when I didn't fall back into place. "I'm not," I said. "I've been very calm." Another silence. Then she tried something else. "If you do this," she said slowly, "it's going to affect how people see this wedding." I let that sit, because for years that would have worked. That concern, that pressure. But now it didn't. "I'm okay with that," I said. And that was the moment it ended. Not the relationship. Not everything. Just that dynamic. The one where she decided and I adjusted. She didn't argue after that. Didn't agree either. The conversation just stopped having power. We ended the call shortly after. No resolution. No dramatic ending. Just quiet distance. And for the first time, that didn't feel wrong. The next day, I walked into the venue again. Same space. Same flowers. Same room. But it felt different. Not because everything had changed, but because I had. I saw Rachel almost immediately. She was standing near the entrance. Waiting. Not unsure. Not hesitant. Just there. Like she always had been. I walked straight to her. No words at first. Just a hug. The kind that settles something you didn't realize was still unsettled. "I'm glad you called," she said quietly. "So am I," I replied. And I meant it in a way I hadn't meant anything in a long time. The ceremony was simple. Exactly how Daniel and I wanted it. Not overdone. Not performative. Just real. There were still people there I didn't know. Still details I would have chosen differently. But none of it felt like it belonged to someone else anymore. Because the important parts were mine. Daniel stood across from me, steady as always. And when we said our vows, I wasn't thinking about expectations. Or appearances. Or whether everything looked right. I was just present. Completely. Fully. And that was new. After everything, my mother stayed. She was polite. Composed. Still involved, but different. More careful. Like she was learning something she hadn't expected to have to learn. We didn't talk much that day. Not about what happened. Not about the call. But there was a quiet shift between us. One that didn't need to be explained to exist. Rachel stayed close the entire evening. Not in a way that drew attention. Just steady. The way she always had been. And at one point I looked around the room. At the people. At the space. At the version of the day that almost wasn't mine. And I realized something simple. Nothing had been ruined. Nothing had fallen apart. I had just stepped into it properly. And everything adjusted around that. Now, when I think back on that day, I don't remember the tension. Or the changes. Or even the phone call. I remember how it felt to finally choose something and not apologize for it. If you've ever felt like your life is being decided quietly around you, pay attention to the moment you stop agreeing. And if this story felt familiar in any way, there's another one waiting for you right here.